Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you're ready to completely recalibrate your understanding of time, religion, and maybe even the very ground you're standing on.
That's a big promise.
It is, but I think we can deliver. We are setting our coordinates for something that feels incredibly distant. We're talking 5,000 years ago. Yet, as we're going to find out, is intimately close to how we live our lives right this second.
We're going back to the beginning.
To the very beginning, we're talking about the land of the civilized lords.
Kiyinger.
Exactly, Kihinger, ancient Sumer. Now, usually when you think of mythology, you think of, I don't know, Zeus throwing lightning bolts or Thor with his hammer.
Right? Fun stories, campfire tale.
Exactly. It's often treated like a collection of fun campfire stories. But today we are looking at the people who essentially invented the concept of a cosmic state. The sources we have for this define Sumerian mythology not as entertainment, but as, and I love this phrase, the architecture of the eternal.
It is a fitting description.
Yeah.
It really is. Because when you look at Sumer, you aren't looking at a culture that just told stories to pass the time. You are looking at, well, humanity's first rigorous intellectual attempt to impose order on a universe that felt completely chaotic.
That is the hook for me. That's what really grabs you. The idea that this entire system of belief wasn't born out of wonder necessarily, but out of anxiety, out of a desperate need to survive.
Precisely. To understand Sumerian myth, you have to understand the ground they were standing on. It is what scholars call the psychology of vulnerability. You have to strip away all our modern comforts and just imagine standing in the Mesopotamian plain in 3500 BC.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack that psychology of vulnerability. Because usually when we learn about the cradle of civilization in school, we hear about the Fertile Crescent, and it sounds lovely.
Sounds idyllic, doesn't it?
Lush, green, perfect for farming. But the reality was a bit more brutal, wasn't it?
It was incredibly brutal. I mean, the best way to understand it is to compare it to Egypt. The Egyptians had the Nile. The Nile was predictable. It was, like clockwork.
Right.
It flooded at the right time every year, brought that rich black soil, and then it receded gently. It was a benevolent, life-giving force. And Egyptian religion reflects that it's relatively optimistic, focused on eternity, preservation, mehat, balance.
The sun always rises, the river always floods, everything is okay, there's rhythm.
A reliable rhythm.
Yeah.
But in Mesopotamia, in the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates, completely different story. These rivers were erratic. They were violent.
It's not like the Nile at all.
Not even close. They were prone to these catastrophic surges that could just wipe out an entire city, all your work overnight. And then you have the other side of it, scorching heat that could reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
Whoa.
Sudden dust storms that would turn day into night. And on top of all that, a constant creeping threat in the soil itself. Salinization. The salt in the earth could destroy your crops for generations.
So, if you are a Sumerian living 5,000 years ago, you don't look at nature and see a friend. You don't see a partner. You see a monster that needs to be tamed.
Exactly. Or maybe not even tamed, just placated.
Yeah.
You see a precarious balance. For the Sumerians, order wasn't the default setting of the universe. Chaos was the default.
That's a huge mental shift.
It's everything.
Yeah.
Order was this hard-won victory that had to be maintained every single day through the back-breaking labor of men and, crucially, the constant appeasement of capricious, easily angered gods.
And the land itself was unstable. I mean, literally. The geography was shifting, right? I read in the notes that the coastline was actually different back then.
Oh, significantly different.
Yeah.
This is fascinating stuff. Geological evidence shows the Persian Gulf extended much, much further inland during the mid-Holocene period. The whole area was a massive marsh.
So more water everywhere.
More water, and the land was actually sinking while the water table was rising due to tectonic activity. So the physical ground beneath their feet was unstable. They were living on a sinking plain.
Which has to be the root of the Great Flood myth.
It almost certainly is the physical root of the flood motif we see again and again. And it's also the root of their concept of the Abzu, this vast subterranean freshwater ocean that they believed lay just underneath the earth. They thought they were literally floating on water.
That sets the stage perfectly. You are living on sinking land between violent rivers under a scorching sun. No wonder your gods are a little intense.
A little intense is an understatement.
But before we even get to the gods, we have to talk about the people themselves. Because there is this big mystery that archaeologists call the Sumerian problem.
Ah, yes, the Sumerian problem. It's one of the great enigmas of the ancient world. The issue, at its core, is language.
Right.
Sumerian is what linguists call an isolate. It has no known relatives, no family. It is not Semitic, like the Akkadian or Babylonian languages that came later in the same region.
So it's not related to Hebrew or Arabic?
No. And it is not Indo-European, so it's not related to Greek or Sanskrit or English.
Yeah.
It just sits there, all alone on the linguistic family tree.
So we don't know where they came from? There's no obvious migration path based on language?
We have theories. Maybe the mountains to the east, maybe they came up from the sea. But there's no definitive proof. And here is where it gets really, really interesting.
Okay.
The names of their rivers, Ediglet and Baranan, which we now call the Tigris and Euphrates, those aren't Sumerian words.
Yeah. What?
And neither are the names of their most ancient, most sacred cities, Eridu, Kish. None of them are Sumerian words.
Hold on. So the famous Sumerian cities don't actually have Sumerian names. How does that work?
Exactly. It strongly suggests there was a population there before the Sumerians arrived, a substrate population. Archaeologists sometimes call them the Ubadians.
And they were the ones who set things up first.
It seems so. They likely built the first canals, the first small settlements. They named the rivers and the places. Then the Sumerians arrived later, and they assimilated this existing culture. They took the infrastructure that was already there and then, superimposed their own language and their theology on top of it.
So it's a cultural fusion, not a conquest necessarily, but a merger.
A fusion that created the spark for everything that followed. Writing, the cylinder seal, the monumental temple complex, the ziggurat. It was likely this friction, this meeting of two different peoples that accelerated the innovation.
Okay, so we have this fusion culture living in a hostile, chaotic environment. How do they explain how it all began? What is the Sumerian Genesis story?
Well, it starts with water. Natural, given their geography, right? Yeah. In the beginning, there was only Namu. She's the primeval sea, the chaotic, primordial, watery abyss, total chaos.
And she creates everything.
She gives birth to a single entity, a cosmic mountain. But this mountain is actually a fused being of An, who is heaven, and Ki, who is earth.
So heaven and earth are stuck together in a big rock.
Locked in an eternal embrace. The universe is dark, it's static, it's undifferentiated. Nothing can live there. There's no room.
So creation isn't making something from nothing.
No, that's a key point. For the Sumerians, the primary act of creation isn't about making something out of a void. It is about separation. It is about making room for things to exist.
And who does the separating? Who breaks them up?
Their son, Enlil. He's the god of air, the god of wind. And in a really quite violent act, he wedges himself between his parents. He pushes his father, An, up to form the sky. And he pins his mother, Kai, down to form the earth.
Wow. That sounds dramatic. A cosmic divorce enforced by their own child.
It is. But it creates the Lil, the atmosphere, the wind space. And this is crucial because the Lil is the only place where life and breath and civilization can actually function. And Lil essentially forces the universe open so that things can happen. It's a creation born of force, not gentle artistry.
So we have a sky, we have an earth, and we have air, but we don't have any people yet. And this is my favorite part of the story because it feels so surprisingly modern, so relatable.
It really is.
The creation of humans isn't some glorious poetic accident. It is, to put it bluntly, a labor dispute.
It is the ultimate labor dispute, the first strike in cosmic history. So you have two classes of gods. You have the Anunnaki, who are the senior gods, the management, the princely offspring.
The board of directors.
The board of directors, exactly. And then you have the Igigi, the junior gods. They're the workers. And the Anunnaki force the Igigi to do all the hard work, digging the canals, dredging the Tigris and Euphrates to keep them from silting up.
Which, as we just established, is terrible, back-breaking, soul-crushing work in that heat.
It is, and for centuries they do it.
Yeah.
But eventually, the Igigi have had enough. They organize. They literally burn their tools, their spades, and their work baskets. And in the middle of the night, they march on Enlil's temple and surround it. It is a full-blown strike. They're threatening a coup.
What gods are on strike? That's amazing. So Enlil, the CEO, is panicking.
He is. He's furious. He's scared. His first instinct is to send in the guards, crush the rebellion. But Enki, the god of wisdom, who is always the clever one, the engineer of the pantheon, he steps in.
And what's his idea?
He proposes a solution. He says, don't punish them. Their work is too hard. Their toil is too great. Let's create a substitute worker. Let's make something else to bear the yoke.
Enter humanity.
Enter us. The Lulu Amalu, the savage man. Enki, with his mother Namu and the birth goddess Ninmah, takes clay from the top of the Abzu, that primordial subterranean water source, and he mixes it with the blood of a god. They sacrifice a minor god to do it.
That is such a powerful image. We're made from mud and divine blood.
It signifies our dual nature perfectly, doesn't it? We are made of the earth, frail, mortal mud. We return to dust. But we have this divine spark, this intelligence, the capacity to organize, to build, to understand complex instructions from our bosses.
But our purpose is very clear from the start.
Oh, crystal clear. Make no mistake.
Mm.
In Sumerian myth, the purpose of humanity is explicitly servitude. We were created for one reason and one reason only: to do the work the gods didn't want to do.
It is incredibly humbling. We aren't the center of the universe. We are the maintenance staff for the cosmic estate.
Exactly. We are the engines that keep the whole thing running so the gods can relax.
Now, speaking of creating humans, there is a specific myth involving Enki and Ninmah that I found incredibly touching and also kind of strange. It's not just about making the perfect worker. It starts with a drinking contest, right?
It does. This is the myth called Enki and Ninmah. After they successfully create these healthy humans to do the work, Enki and Ninmah are celebrating. They throw a feast, and they drink too much beer.
A common theme with Enki, it seems.
He enjoys a drink. And in their drunken state, Ninmah, the birth goddess, she challenges Enki. It's a bet. She says, I can create bodies with distinct fates, what we might call broken bodies, disabled bodies, and I bet you, with all your wisdom, can't find a place for them in society. I bet you can't give them a function.
It is a dare.
Yeah.
She is challenging his ingenuity, his core identity as the problem solver.
It's a high-stakes dare. So he starts making people. First, he makes a man who cannot see, a blind man. Enki looks at him and says, no problem. And he decrees that this man will be a master musician, a singer in the king's court, a revered position.
So he turns a perceived deficit into a specialized skill.
Precisely. Then she makes a woman who cannot bear children, a barren woman. In that society, that's a huge issue. Enki says, I will place her in the queen's household as a weaver, a position of high status where, frankly, not having children to care for is actually an asset.
This just blows my mind because usually in ancient cultures, disability is seen as a curse or a punishment from the gods, a sin, but here they are literally baking it into the creation story as a divine challenge.
It is a profoundly sophisticated and compassionate theological statement. It asserts that every variation of humanity has a divinely ordained purpose. It is not an accident, it is not a mistake. There is a slot for everyone in the social hierarchy. It shows the Sumerian obsession with function. Everything must have a purpose, a me, a destiny.
What else does she create?
She creates a person with neither male nor female genitalia, perhaps an intersex person, or what we might understand as a eunuch. And Enki gives them a high position in the palace administration, as a servant to the king, a role that requires trust and is outside the normal family structure.
So in every case, he finds a place. But there is a limit, isn't there? The story takes a turn.
It does. The contest ends when Enki decides to turn the tables. He creates a being himself, a being named Umul. And Umul is so profoundly afflicted he cannot move, he cannot eat, he cannot even speak. He lies there helpless. And Enki challenges Ninmah, find a role for him, give him bread.
And she can't.
She gives up. She can't do it. She admits defeat. The being is too broken to function.
That is heavy. It's so realistic.
It is a somber note to end on. It admits that while wisdom in the form of Enki can mitigate a lot of suffering and find roles for almost everyone, there are limits. There are some forms of suffering that even the gods cannot fix. It's a profound recognition of the tragedy that can exist in life.
That is surprisingly nuanced for a 5,000-year-old story. Let's look at this management team, the Pantheon. You mentioned the Anunnaki, but the Sumerians were obsessed with lists and numbers. It wasn't just about titles, was it? They ranked them by number.
Oh, completely. The numerology of the sacred. You have to remember, the Sumerians used a sexagesimal system based 60. That's why we still have 60 seconds in a minute. And they applied this mathematical worldview to their gods. They assigned numbers to the major deities to show their rank.
So who was number one?
Well, the highest number, the perfect number, was 60. And that belonged to Anan, the Sky Father.
The chairman of the board.
The chairman of the board, exactly. But he was what scholars call a deus otheosis, a remote idol god. He's the ultimate authority. He confers legitimacy, but he doesn't really get his hands dirty with the day-to-day running of the universe.
So the real power was with the next one down.
Absolutely. The real executive power lay was number 50.
And Lyle.
The CEO. The CEO, Lord of the wind, Lord of the air. He holds the tablets of destiny, which decree the fate of the world. He is severe, he is decisive, and frankly, he could be a bit terrifying. He's the one who gets fed up with humanity's noise and authorizes the Great Flood. He rules from his holy city, Nippur.
And then we have number 40.
Number 40 is our clever friend, Enki, the god of wisdom, magic, and crucially, the fresh water of the Abzu. He rules from the city of Eridu, which the Sumerians believed was the very first city on Earth.
So if Enlil is the authority.
Enki is the brilliance, he's the trickster, the scientist, the magician. He is the great benefactor of humanity. When Enlil decides to wipe us all out with a flood, it is Enki who finds a loophole and whispers to a human, Zusudra, to build a boat.
It's a classic good cop, bad cop dynamic at the top. Authority versus ingenuity.
A constant tension that drives many of their myths. And then, as you go down the list, you have 30 for Nana, the moon god of Ur, 20 for Utu, the sun god and god of justice.
And then we have to talk about Inanna. She's number 15, right? Way down the list.
She is number 15, yes. But don't let the number fool you. Inanna is. Well, she's complicated. She is the goddess of two seemingly contradictory things, love and war. Her symbol is the lion and the 8-pointed star of the planet Venus.
Love and war. That seems like a strange pairing.
Not to the Sumerians. Think about it. They are both overwhelming passions. They're forces that can consume you, make you do irrational things, build things up, and tear them down. Inanna is the embodiment of that paradox.
And she's ambitious.
Incredibly ambitious.
Rash.
Restless. She is central to the political history of the region as told through myth. There is a famous story where she travels from her city, Uk, to the ancient city of Eridu, Enki's home.
Let me guess. Beer is involved.
A lot of beer is involved. She gets Enki drunk in his own temple. And while he's passed out, she steals the me.
The me. You mentioned this. Tell us what these are. This is a critical concept.
It is. The me, pronounced me, are the fundamental building blocks of civilization. But the Sumerians thought of them as physical objects. You could literally pick them up, wear them, load them onto a boat.
What kind of objects are we talking about?
There's a list of over 100 of them. It includes all the things you'd expect, like kingship, priesthood, truth, and justice. But it also includes things like basket weaving, leatherworking, and prostitution.
Wait, prostitution is one of the foundational technologies of civilization?
It is, and so are fear, strife, and the art of wrecking cities. In the Sumerian view, civilization isn't just the good stuff, it is the whole package. It is the complete technology of society. You can't have a city without conflict and fear, just like you can't have one without weaving and law.
So when Inanna steals these May from Enki,
she loads them all onto her boat of heaven and sails back to Uruk as fast as she can. Enki sobers up, realizes what's happened, and sends his monsters after her 7 times to get them back.
Yeah.
But she fends them off.
And what does that story mean?
It's a mythological explanation for a political shift. It explains how Uruk rose to become the dominant city-state, eclipsing the older, more venerable Eridu. Uruk's power came because their goddess literally stole the tech, the divine source code of civilization.
That is a brilliant way to frame political history. We have the basket weaving and the kingship now. Sorry, Eridu.
Exactly. It validates Uruk's dominance as divinely ordained, even if it was through trickery.
Let's move from the gods to the heroes who interacted with them, because Sumer gives us the very first superhero, really. Gilgamesh, or as the Sumerians called him.
Bilgams, yes. Most people today know the later Babylonian version, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a masterpiece. But the original Sumerian sources are actually 5 separate independent poems. They haven't been woven into one continuous story yet.
And he is a king of Uruk, Inanna's city.
He is. He's described as 2/3 god, 1/3 man, a demigod. And his stories from the very beginning are all about the limits of mortality.
So not just about fighting monsters for the sake of it.
No, there's always a deeper anxiety. Take the story of Gilgamesh and Huwawa. He decides to go to the legendary cedar forest to kill its monstrous guardian Huwawa. But why? He says it himself. He's terrified of dying and being forgotten. He says, I have not established my name.
It's an existential crisis. He needs to do something permanent.
It is. He needs to create a legacy. So he and his best friend Enkidu go to the forest. He actually tricks the monster Huwawa into giving up his auras, these 7 protective rays of light, by offering him his sisters as wives.
And then he kills him.
And then he kills him. But even in the myth, it's ambiguous, and Lively is furious. Slaying the sacred guardian of the forest is seen as a transgression, an act of hubris.
And then there's the relationship with his friend Enkidu.
The relationship with Enkidu is the emotional core of all these stories. And in the Sumerian poem, Gilgamesh and Enkidu in the Netherworld, we get a very, very grim look at their view of the afterlife.
What happens in that one?
Gilgamesh is given a drum and a stick, a puku and a miku, by Inanna, but he drops them, and they fall through a hole into the underworld. Enkidu, being a loyal friend, volunteers to go down and get them for him.
That sounds like a bad idea.
It's a terrible idea. Gilgamesh warns him, don't wear clean clothes, don't anoint yourself with oil, don't make a sound. Break any of the taboos of the dead and you'll be seized.
And of course, Enkidu does all of those things.
He does. He gets trapped there. He can't leave. Gilgamesh is devastated, and eventually, through the intervention of Enki, he's allowed to speak to Enkidu's ghost.
And what does the ghost say?
Gilgamesh asks him, "Tell me, my friend, tell me about the laws of the underworld." And Enkidu's ghost just says, "I cannot tell you. So, my friend, I cannot tell you. If I told you the order of the underworld, you would sit down and weep."
That is haunting. If I told you, you would weep.
It's a devastating line. And it leads to the central realization that defines Gilgamesh's entire character arc. Despite his strength, despite being a king and a demigod, he cannot escape the fate of mankind. He will die. And death is horrible. That is the hard truth at the center of Sumerian thought.
Speaking of trying to escape that fate, we have to mention a couple of other figures. What about Etana?
Etana, the first king of the city of Kish after the flood. His story is about a different kind of immortality. Legacy through children. Etana had no heir, and he desperately wanted one. He prayed to find the plant of birth.
And where was this plant?
In heaven, of course. So he helps an eagle whose nest had been attacked by a serpent. And in return, the eagle agrees to fly him up to the heaven of the goddess Adi.
So he rides an eagle to heaven.
He does. And the text contains what might be the first aerial perspective in all of literature. As they fly higher, Etana looks down and describes the earth shrinking. He says, the land had become a garden ditch. It's an incredible image. The story is fragmented, but it seems he succeeds and gets his heir.
And then there's Adapa, who gets offered actual immortality and turns it down.
The story of Adapa is maybe the most tragic what-if story. He was one of the 7 sages, a wise priest of Enki in Eridu. The story goes that he was out fishing for the temple, and the south wind suddenly blew and capsized his boat.
He must have been furious.
In a fit of rage, Adapa used a magic curse and broke the wing of the south wind. For 7 days, the south wind didn't blow.
He broke the wind's wing. That is impressive. And it gets the attention of the high god.
It does. The high god On summons Adapa to heaven to explain himself. But before he goes, his patron Enki gives him some very specific advice. He says, listen, when you get there, they will offer you food and water. Do not touch them. It is the food of death, the water of death.
Classic Enki, always playing an angle. Is he telling the truth?
Well, Adapa goes to heaven, he explains himself, and Anne is actually impressed by Adapa's wisdom and his honesty. So impressed, in fact, that he decides to reward him. He orders the food of life and the water of life to be brought. He's going to make Adapa immortal.
But Adapa refuses.
He refuses. He follows Enki's orders. He won't eat or drink.
Oh, no.
And Anne is just baffled. He looks at him and basically laughs, saying, what is wrong with humanity? And he sends Adapa back to Earth, still mortal. So humanity lost the chance for immortality because of a trick, or perhaps a test by Enki.
Why would Enki do that?
The implication is that Enki wanted to keep humans as they were. Useful, intelligent servants. He didn't want us to become gods and upset the cosmic order.
That is so tragic. It's like the anti-Adam and Eve. Instead of eating the forbidden fruit and falling from grace, he refused the divine food and was locked into his mortal state.
Precisely. It cements our mortality as a result of divine trickery.
So we are mortal, we are servants. Let's talk about the workplace, the city. You mentioned earlier that the city was a divine manor. What does that mean for daily life?
It means everything. This is key to understanding their culture. The city didn't belong to the people, it belonged to a god. Eridu was Enki's estate. Nippur belonged to Enlil. Uruk was Inanna's property. Humans were just the staff.
Yeah.
The temple, the ziggurat, was literally the god's house.
And the ziggurat, we've all seen pictures of these huge stepped pyramids, but they weren't for public worship, right? You didn't go inside for a Sunday sermon?
No, not at all. You have to think of the ziggurat as a stairway to heaven. It was a solid brick connector, the base was on earth, the summit touched heaven, and its foundations were thought to pierce the Abzu. It was built so the god could descend from heaven to their bedchamber, a small temple at the very top.
So it's about the god's convenience, not the public's comfort.
Entirely. The public ceremonies happened in the courtyards below. The ziggurat itself was restricted territory.
And the people running this divine estate, the priests, were highly specialized.
Extremely. At the top, you had the En, the high priest or priestess. This was a hugely powerful position. In the city of Ur, the high priestess of the moon god Nanna was often the king's own daughter, like the famous Enheduanna, who is arguably the first named author in all of human history.
Wow.
But then you had all these other specialists, the Sangha, who are the administrators, and then you have the Gala priests. These are fascinating.
The lamentation priests.
Yes. Their primary job was to soothe the angry heart of the gods. When a god was angry, often, it was the gala's job to sing these beautiful, sad songs, lamentations, to calm them down and avert disaster.
And there was something special about their language, right?
There was. The texts tell us they used a specific Sumerian dialect called Imisal, or fine tongue, which was otherwise a dialect reserved for female speech in the myths.
So male priests were using a female dialect.
Yes, and there is strong textual evidence that many Gala priests were gender fluid or eunuchs. They occupied a liminal space, a space between male and female. The theological idea was that this in-between nature allowed them to better bridge the gap between the human and the divine. They could speak to a goddess like Inanna in a way a typical man couldn't.
That is really compelling, the idea that to communicate with the divine, you have to step outside of rigid earthly categories.
It's a very sophisticated concept of gender and spiritual function, especially for the ancient world.
And then there is the big ritual that brought all this together, the sacred marriage, the hero's gamos.
The central event of the ritual year. This was part of the Akitu, or New Year, festival. The king would take on the divine role of Dumuzi, the shepherd god, Inanna's consort.
And the high priestess would become Inanna.
Exactly. She would embody the goddess, and they would unite.
Unite, symbolically or physically.
The texts are quite erotic and explicit. It's debated whether it was always a physical act or sometimes just a ritual one, but the symbolism was paramount. The text described the bedroom, the preparations, the joy of their union.
And the purpose was more than just political.
Oh, it was cosmic. The purpose was to magically jumpstart the fertility of the land for the coming year. It was a sympathetic magic ritual on the grandest scale. If the king and the goddess don't unite, the sap doesn't rise in the trees, the grain doesn't grow, the sheep don't have lambs. The political order and the natural order were fused together in that sacred bedroom.
So life in Sumer is about serving the gods to keep the chaos at bay. But what happens when you die? We talked about Gilgamesh's fear. Was he right to be so afraid?
Absolutely, 100%. The Sumerian afterlife, which they called the Kur, or the Great Below, is one of the bleakest visions in the entire ancient world. It is not a paradise. It is not a place of reward.
Sounds lovely.
It's a dark, cold, dust-filled cavern deep underground. You cross a river to get there, the river Huber, which is a clear precursor to the Greek river Styx. And once you are there, your food is dust and your drink is clay.
So everyone goes to the same miserable place.
Everyone, rich or poor, king or peasant, good or evil, you all end up in the same gloomy, silent darkness. It is the great equalizer, and it's not a happy ending.
There is a specific myth that maps this out in terrifying detail, Inanna's descent.
One of the greatest pieces of literature we have from the ancient world. It's incredible. Inanna, the queen of heaven, at the height of her power, decides to visit the underworld. Why? The text says she wants to extend her power there. It's ruled by her older sister, Ereshkigal.
Sibling rivalry on a cosmic scale.
Massive rivalry. But the underworld has rules, and they apply to everyone. To get to her sister's throne, Inanna must pass through 7 gates. And at each gate, the gatekeeper demands she remove a piece of her regalia, her crown, her jewels, her royal robe.
She is being stripped of her divine powers.
Exactly. Each item is a symbol of her power and authority. By the time she reaches the throne room of Ereshkigal, she is naked and bowed low. She has no power here. She is helpless.
And what does her sister do?
Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead, simply looks at her with the eye of death, speaks a word of wrath, and Inanna dies instantly. Then she has her corpse hung on a hook on the wall like a piece of meat in a butcher shop.
That is a brutal image for the goddess of love and war, hung on a hook.
It shows that even the most powerful gods are subject to the absolute unyielding laws of death. But here's the twist. Enki had a feeling this might happen. He creates a plan to save her.
What does he do?
He takes the dirt from under his fingernails and fashions 2 strange, sexless creatures, the Frigara and the Galater, and he sends them down to the underworld with a mission.
To fight Ereshkigal, to stage a rescue.
No, something much cleverer. He sends them to empathize with her. When they arrive, Ereshkigal is in the throes of agony, groaning with the pain of a woman in labor, perhaps the cosmic labor of overseeing all death. And these little creatures, that they don't attack her, they just echo her pain. When she groans, "Oh, my inside hurts," they groan back, "Oh, our inside hurts too."
They validate her suffering. They offer her sympathy.
Yeah, in this place of absolute misery, it's the first act of kindness Ereshkigal has ever seen. She's so shocked and pleased that she offers them a gift. Ask for anything, she says. And they ask for Inanna's corpse hanging on the hook.
That is profound. Force failed Inanna, but empathy saved her.
It is a stunning psychological insight. But there is a catch. There's always a catch. The unshakable law of substitution. No one leaves the underworld for free. Inanna can go, but someone must take her place.
And she chooses her own husband, Dumuzi.
She does. She returns to the world of the living and finds him not mourning her, but sitting on her throne, dressed in fine clothes, enjoying his new power. She is furious. She points the demons of the underworld at him and says, "Take him."
And this explains the seasons.
This is their explanation for the cycle of the seasons in Mesopotamia. Dumuzi, the shepherd god, is taken down to the underworld for half the year, the hot, dry summer when everything dies. And then he is allowed to return in the spring, bringing new life with him. It's a cycle of death and reluctant rebirth.
It is all connected, the seasons, the death, the rituals, but archaeology tells us this wasn't just a story. The beliefs about the afterlife had very real, very grim consequences. Let's talk about the royal tombs of Ur.
The grim reality, yes. When the archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the royal cemetery at Ur in the 1920s, he found these incredible tombs of kings and queens from around 2600 BCE. They were filled with treasure, but they're also filled with bodies.
Dozens of bodies.
Dozens. They found the queen, Kwabi, buried with over 70 attendants. Servants, musicians still with their lyres, guards with their spears, ox drivers with their oxen.
And they didn't just die of natural causes at the same time. This was something else.
Yo. The evidence strongly suggests mass sacrifice. They're likely poisoned, they found cups near the bodies, or killed with blunt force trauma, then arranged neatly in their positions. The idea was clear. The king or queen needs their staff in the afterlife. If the afterlife is a grim, dusty cavern, you better bring your own entourage to make it even remotely bearable.
That sends a chill down my spine. The absolute belief required to line up and drink that poison.
It shows you how deeply they believed this, and how terrifying the cur was. You would not want to face it alone.
So, individual death is belief, but what about the end of the world? Did they have an apocalypse myth, like a Ragnarok or an Armageddon?
That's a great question. And the answer is no, not really. They didn't fear the end of the world, but they were obsessed with the end of cities. This is a unique Sumerian literary genre, the city lament.
Right, because for them, the city was the world. It was the bubble of order in the sea of chaos.
Precisely. The city was civilization. The end of the city was the end of everything that mattered. When the great city of Ur, the capital of a huge empire, collapsed around 2004 BCE, destroyed by invaders from the east, the Elamites and Amorites.
The scribes didn't write a history of the war.
No, they didn't just write a history of military defeat. They wrote a theological explanation, a lament. They said the gods had become angry and abandoned their temples like migrating birds. Enlil had unleashed a destructive storm.
So it wasn't the Elamites' fault. It was Enlil's decision.
In their worldview, yes, the lament for Ur is a heartbreaking piece of writing. It describes a storm that touches the earth like a ghostly hand. But the most poignant part is a debate between the patron god of Ur, the moon god Nanna, and his father Enlil. Nanna begs and pleads for his beloved city to be spared.
And what does Enlil say?
Enlil says something devastatingly pragmatic, and it's one of the most important lines to understand their political theology. He says, Ur was indeed granted kingship, but it was not granted an eternal reign.
Wow. That's cold.
It is. It's their statement on the transience of power. It's their theodicy. The mandate of Hevia moves. It moved from Eridu to Uruk, then to Ur, then it would move on to Ison or Babylon. No empire lasts forever. It is a cyclical view of history that is both profoundly cynical and brutally realistic.
That feels very, very relevant today. Kingship, but not an eternal reign. Before we get to the legacy, I want to quickly touch on the visual symbols. If we were to walk through a Sumerian market, what kind of iconography would we see?
Well, the most personal and common thing you'd see is everyone carrying a cylinder seal. These are small stone cylinders, beautifully engraved with intricate images. You would roll them on wet clay to sign a document or seal a storage jar.
So it was your signature and your ID card in one.
Exactly. It was functional art. And the images often depicted mythological scenes, so it reinforced these stories in daily life.
And the gods themselves, if we saw a statue, how would we know it's a god?
The horn cap. That was the ultimate marker of divinity. If a figure in art is wearing a cap with bull horns, they are a god. And the more horns, the higher their rank. Enlil would have a cap with multiple pairs of horns stacked on top of each other.
A symbol of immense power. And what about the rod and ring? We see kings being given these by gods.
Ah, the rod and ring. These are the primary symbols of divine authority granted to a king. They are measuring tools, a measuring rod and a coiled rope or ring for measurement. It shows that the right to rule is the right to measure, to divide land, to build the state correctly, and to enforce the law. It's a very practical, engineering-based view of justice.
Which leads us perfectly to the legacy, because measuring is the thing that Sumer never stopped doing. We are arguably still living in their world in Sumer, aren't we?
In a very literal sense, yes. I mean, just look at your watch or your phone.
Okay.
Why is an hour divided into 60 minutes? Why is a minute divided into 60 seconds? Why is a circle 360 degrees?
Because of the Sumerians.
Because of that base 60 sexagesimal system we talked about. They developed it to track the stars and the planets, which they saw as the movements of the divine. And that mathematical system was so robust, so good for division, that it was passed on to the Babylonians, then to the Greeks, and eventually to us. Every single time a clock ticks, it is echoing the mathematics of the Sumerian priesthood.
That is the ultimate invisible legacy. It's so deeply embedded we don't even see it. But there is a much more visible one, too, in the stories we all think we know, in the Bible.
Oh, the parallels are undeniable and profound. The biblical flood story in Genesis is a direct literary descendant of the Sumerian tale. The hero Noah is a descendant of Ziusudra, the Sumerian flood hero. The details, the building of the boat, the sending out of the birds to find dry land, are strikingly similar.
And the Garden of Eden? That feels like such a core story.
The Sumerian word Eden means steppe or plain. And they had a mythological paradise called Dilmun, a pure holy land where the lion kills not and sickness is unknown. It's the clear blueprint for the concept of a primordial paradise.
Even the Tower of Babel. Don't tell me that's in there, too.
It is. There is a Sumerian tale called Enmerkar and the Lord of Arada. And in a passage, it describes a golden age when the whole universe, all people, spoke one language, until the god Enki, in his role as a trickster, changed the speech in their mouths and introduced confusion. It is the confusion of tongues motif, almost 2,000 years before the Bible was written down.
It is just incredible to think that these stories, which we think of as foundational to Western religion, have roots going even deeper into this mud-brick civilization between two rivers.
Even the themes, the book of Job. The central theme of the suffering righteous, a good, pious man who suffers for no apparent reason and questions his God's justice. That entire genre appears first in a Sumerian poem called Man and His God. They were grappling with these huge existential questions way, way back then.
So as we wrap this up, let's go back to that opening idea, the architecture of the eternal. What is the final big takeaway here? What did they build that lasted?
For me, the Sumerian achievement is an architectural project of the mind. They looked at a world that was actively hostile, a world that was trying to kill them with floods, heat, and storms. And they didn't just run away or give up. They built a mental fortress.
A way to make sense of it all.
More than that, a way to impose order on it. They invented the concept of law. They invented the concept of kingship as a divine institution. They invented bureaucracy. And most fundamentally, they invented the minute and the second.
They imposed a grid on the chaos.
They did. And here's the final thought for you. Their ziggurats are just mounds of melted mud now. You can go to Iraq and barely see them. They're gone. But the mental structures they built, the way we measure time, the way we think about law, the way we tell stories about floods and paradise and divine justice, those are still the bedrock of our reality. We are still living in their timeline.
That is a powerful thought. The ziggurat is gone, but the 60-second minute remains.
And that is the heavy thought for the day. Every time you check the time, you are, in a way, paying tribute to the intellectual world of Enki and Enlil.
I will never look at a clock the same way again. And that brings us to the end of our journey to the land of the civilized lords.
It has been a fascinating trip back in time.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mud and myth of ancient Sumer, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss where our journey is going to take us next.
We've got plenty more history to uncover.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay curious.